Hi everyone, and welcome to our channel. Over the years, I've been asked how can you create realistic looking hand-carved texture? There's a great demand to have very smooth finishes on your work with the CNC, but there are some times when the hand-carved texture looks more appropriate. Let's take a look to see if this is possible within the Aspire software. If we open a session of Aspire, we can go over to the Toolpath section, and within there's an icon for Textured Toolpath. Within that Toolpath texture icon window, there's a lot of options, a lot of numbers that could be filled in. Each one will create a slightly different texture. And it does a pretty good job at creating this texture. So let's see if we can apply this texture to an existing model. Give a little roughness to it, a little hand-carved quality to it. I go to our Clip Art tab and I randomly select one of the existing models within the software. Let's say the horse. Simply double-clicking on it brings it into our session of Aspire, and I'm going to enlarge it so we can use this texture to see if it's going to work. I'm also going to create a finish toolpath. This is just for an example. I would maybe use a roughing toolpath in real life, but this is just for the software example. So there's the finished toolpath of our horse, and here's the textured toolpath that I've created. Interestingly, the textured toolpath was not applied to the horse itself. The logic is that the texture toolpath will only cut on the surface of the material, unless we go back into the texture toolpath and click on the little checkbox that says to project the toolpath onto the 3D model. Now, if we rerun the preview of our textures, you'll see that the texture has been applied to the horse head, but it also has taken all of the material away. So let's run the finish toolpath to see if that helps. It certainly doesn't look like a good finished horse head. Not really what I expected. Let's try this another way. We take our horse head. We're going to create the bounding vector around just that model. I select that vector and create a texture toolpath using the selected vector and the 3D model. And now we have another example of that texture. But it certainly doesn't have the detail of the horse head. So I go back and create a finish toolpath, once again, of just the horse head to see if this can help at all. Preview all toolpaths after resetting the preview. And still, it's a rather disappointing look. There's our horse head and our texture toolpath. Not what I would consider acceptable. Maybe there's another way that this could be done. I'm going to create my texture toolpath, not projected onto a 3D model, just so it's a flat texture, in a sense. If you've watched my other videos, you know I'm very fond of using what I call a skin. So I'm going to create a component from this preview and apply it to our horse head. You can see in the component tree I have the horsehead clip art, as well as now this texture. Both are set to add, so the texture has been added to the horsehead. We'll choose that bounding vector of the horsehead and eliminate the outside texture, just so the texture sits on the horsehead. Since it is a component by itself, I can adjust its base height and its shape height. Gives me a little bit more freedom to slightly change the end result. Looks a lot better than the previous attempts, but it's still not what I was looking for. The reason being is, if I was to carve this out, the stroke of my knife would not always be in a horizontal position, or vertical, or whatever angle I chose for the software. I think the strokes of my knife would follow the shape of the head. So, can this be done within the software? Let me show you what I came up with. So let's start over. I have a session of Aspire open, and I'm going to create an oval. And from that oval, I'm going to create a component shape, a dish shape. There's no set size on what this shape should look like, or even what the property should be of the profile, whether it's a dish or a pyramid or a flat. I just chose a dish shape because I envision this to be more of that gouged look that I'm trying to recreate. I right-click on that, and I'm going to save it as a brush, a sculpting brush. I delete my vector, I don't need that anymore, and I uncheck the brush because I really don't need to see it. For this example, here's the new thing in version 11. We can go into the sculpting tool, and we can choose to use a sculpting brush as our tool. Now this is only available on the deposit and remove options. You cannot use the sculpting brush on the smooth or smudge. So I'm going to choose the deposit, choose a brush, find the one that we've just created. You have some options of merge and direction. But the first thing I'd like to show you is the size. We could do full strength, and there's the end result of our brush. It creates a new component. I can take that and hold my left mouse key down and drag it across, or I can keep clicking. But with the property set as default, you could see it's an odd end result. Let's choose the merge these components together. And it's starting to look like that hand-carved texture that I'm looking for. There's also the option of the dynamic rotation. With the sculpting brush, you can also rotate it to position it as need be. So I wonder, is this possible to use to create a texture for my horse head? Let's try. I bring in a new horse head, increase its size so it fills more of our workspace. Go back into our sculpting tool. The horse head is not selected because I'm going to be creating a new component of that sculpting brush. Choose the brush. Set it to merge. You can see the grayscale can be visible or not if you'd like. Change the diameter to full size. And I can start to apply that texture to where the horse head is. And I'm going to rotate now this brush, this sculpting pattern, to sort of follow the undulations or shape of the horse head. I try to envision how I would carve this out if I was actually making it. It does take a little bit of time to think through this. At what angle would you be carving this out with a knife? And what size would you be using? I can change the diameter or the size of the component that I'm using for the ears, if need be. I rotate the brush so it follows the curve of the neck of the horse, giving it a more realistic hand-carved look. The previous texture that we tried from the texture toolpath only goes in one direction. This new approach gives you the option to create a similar look, but using different directions. I choose not to carve the mane of the horse, simply because I think it'll add a little bit more interest. If I go beyond the horse head, I can always delete that with a bounding vector. When I'm done, I keep it and hit OK. And that's what the texture could look like. Because it is a component by itself, I have the opportunity to adjust the shape height or the base height to make it a little bit more subtle or more pronounced if need be. So this is just one example of how you can use this new option within version 11, the sculpting brush, to be able to create interesting patterns. I click on that bounding vector I've created, choose my textured option, and delete everything outside, or keep everything within that closed vector. Again, it's just one more option on how you can change things. The before and the after. Let's take another look at an option that you can use with this sculpting tool brush. Within our clip art library, we have several versions of the models that are included. I'm going to look at that same horse head, except this time it's in this textured or undulating disc shape. I think it's supposed to look as if it was hand carved. I will say I've tried to replicate this many times over the years and was not quite successful. But it does seem to be a popular style for a lot of people. Here's an approach that you may want to consider. We have our original horse head. we're going to go, as we did previously, into the Sculpting tool. And we're going to select a new brush that I've created. I adjust the size to full strength, and this is the size of the end result of the brush. I wish it was bigger. I wonder if there would be a way to create a larger brush. If you're familiar with what I talk about, I always think using very high modeling resolution for your 3D work is appropriate. I also know that this new sculpting brush, Logic, is based upon the number of pixels. The 301 that you see on the slide bar represents that there are 301 pixels being utilized to create that shape. So, if my very high modeling resolution is only using 301 pixels and creates a rather small component shape, I started to think if I changed my resolution within this model to standard, would my brush then be larger because my pixels are larger? Let's take a look. I go into my job setup, change my modeling resolution to standard on the fly. Go back into my modeling tab. And you'll see that my brush is much larger. I choose the sculpting brush that I did previously, and now look at the size. So the modeling resolution in this case at standard does offer more benefits. It allows you to have the largest brush possible because there are 301 pixels within that shape. I choose a size that's appropriate, and I go around the perimeter of the horse head, creating that hand-carved look. The easy way to rotate it is simply using the wheel on your mouse. You could use the slide bar if you'd like, but the wheel seems to be a lot quicker, and simply click. And there's our component. Change the property to merge. I'm going to adjust the base height just so that I can see what it looks like more realistically. I also need to adjust the base height of the horse head so it sits above our new textured perimeter. Add a zero plane, and it's starting to look rather interesting. Something similar to the horse head that comes with the software. That hand-gouged perimeter look. I'm going to add a little more texture to the area right underneath the horse head itself, that flat area that I missed. I choose another brush that I created earlier. It's a little longer and a little more narrow to be able to create gouged marks. You can use any 3D model as a sculpting brush, so you can create your own. Change the base height of this new texture just so it breaks the surface. And using the technique of drawing a boundary vector around a component and then selecting a vector to delete or keep existing component becomes useful. And since they are their own components, you can adjust the shape height or the base height as needed. So there we have it, a hand-carved look for the background of the horse head. Let's take this another step further. I'm going to create a new session of Aspire. The normal job setup. The modeling resolution is very high. And I'm going to create some text. With that text selected, I'm going to create a component. Just a regular flat component with some base height. With that new component visible, I'm going to add a draft to it. This is just to give it a little bit of interest, a little bit of dimension. Looks good so far. Our next step, I'm going to add some Christmas trees, some evergreens. Within the software, we have a grouping of 3 trees. I double-click and bring them into this session and position them accordingly. And I want to make sure that the trees don't interfere with the words, so I set the properties to merge. With them unselected, I go back to our sculpting option and I use the brush again. I've created a special one just for this project, and as I've said, you can create as many as you want. I try to adjust the size to make it larger, but it's still not as big as I want it to be. You can get rather small with it, but that 301 is the maximum size I can use for this brush. Remember, it's the number of pixels, 301. So let's close this out. Go back to our job setup and change our modeling resolution. I still believe the very high modeling resolution is most appropriate, but in this case, for this process of using a sculpting brush, standard gives you many more options of size. Choose the brush. We can see how much larger it is at this point. Making sure it's set to merge. And simply follow the perimeter of our Merry Christmas text as well as the trees. This is the first opportunity I've had to experiment with this new textured brush, sculpting brush as they call it. I know I liked it when I first saw it when it was first introduced in version 11. But now that I've had the opportunity to play with it, I can see it offers a wide variety of good things. More options to create unique and individual 3D models. Adding a little more texture to that center spot. And when I'm happy, I hit OK. Add a zero plane, and that's what the dish or the new texture could look like. More of that hand-carved. Here's an actual example. I did cut it out, and I think it's rather interesting. A nice approach. Just more options for you to play with. I hope you give it a try and come up with your own textures, your own sculpting brush to see what you can do. Thanks for watching. I hope you've learned a little bit. If you'd like to learn more about the software, click on the subscribe button and make sure you hit the bell so you're reminded of upcoming videos. If you have a question, send me an email, mm@mezalick.com. I'll try to help. And if you'd like to help out, consider buying me a coffee. It's very, very much appreciated. It certainly does help in many ways. Thanks. See you next time. Enjoy.